One pleasant afternoon, a brother and sister were enjoying themselves in a picturesque garden. The garden was lush with vibrant flowers, and there was a sturdy old tree with a swing attached to it, standing majestically beside a serene lake. The boy, full of energy and excitement, stood on the swing and eagerly asked his sister to push him harder. The sister, always wanting to please her younger brother, did as he asked. With a powerful push, the boy swung high and then, laughing with exhilaration, let go and plunged into the lake. Water splashed everywhere, soaking his sister, who watched with a mixture of amusement and concern. The boy emerged from the water, his face beaming with joy. He exclaimed that it was incredibly fun and insisted that his sister should try it too. The sister hesitated, feeling a pang of worry. She glanced at the swing and thought, isn't this more like a scene from a dramatic suicide where someone jumps from the top of a swing into a lake? She looked at her brother, who was brimming with enthusiasm, and thought to herself that this boy, who would one day become the strongest person in the world, seemed unstoppable. Meanwhile, she feared she would end up in the afterlife if she tried this stunt. Yet, her brother was relentless. He insisted once again, telling her how enjoyable the swing was and urging her to give it a go. Reluctantly, the sister stood on the swing. Her heart pounded in her chest as her brother, full of encouragement, gave her a strong push. She flew through the air and then plummeted into the lake. As she went underwater, she felt a wave of panic. No matter how hard she struggled, there seemed to be no way to escape this situation. The real story begins now. In her previous life, our female protagonist was an ordinary graduate student. One day, she and her fellow assistants went on a team-building activity, which involved climbing a hill behind their campus. The hike was exhausting, and she found herself struggling to keep up. The guide, noticing their fatigue, cheerfully encouraged them to buckle up, reminding them that young people like them shouldn't be worn out so easily. Our protagonist, polite and respectful, told the guide that keeping up with him was challenging because he was so fit. The real reason she was tired was that she had been dragged out for this hike after pulling an all-nighter in the lab the previous day. As they climbed, he remarked that this place hadn't changed since his student days and decided to take a picture to commemorate his visit. Our protagonist, always helpful, stood up and offered to take the pictures for him. She was good at photography and was happy to assist. She started clicking pictures of the man, asking him to pose in various ways to capture the moment perfectly. As she busily snapped photos, she edged closer to the end of the mountain. The old man, wanting a better shot, advised her to step back a bit more to capture the full background. Obliging his request, she took a step back but miscalculated her footing and fell from the mountain. At that moment, she realized with horror that she was going to die. Back in her current life, her brother, showing remarkable strength, pulled her out of the lake. He asked her if she was all right, his face filled with concern. The sister, still dazed from the experience, marveled at her brother's incredible grip strength. She knew that he would become the strongest person in the future. Her brother, clearly shaken, scolded her gently, telling her to stop playing such dangerous pranks with him. After a while, they resumed playing together, but the sister's mind was elsewhere. She thought about how she was already on Killian's bad side. If she couldn't win him over, her future life could be in jeopardy. A while ago, she had found herself among a group of people. This little girl stood quietly with them, listening as they discussed her fate. They were debating how they could take her in when they already had 5 children of their own. After saying goodbye to her previous world, due to the professor's photo, she had opened her eyes to find herself in the middle of a cemetery. The people around her were discussing their inability to take her in because they were not in a position to do so. Our female protagonist had died in her original world and was reborn in this new one. As a cute little girl, her height barely reached the waist of an adult, and she was surrounded by people who seemed quite angry for some reason. It seemed like she was an orphan, not welcomed by anyone. People started pushing her towards others, asking them to take her, but nobody wanted to. Suddenly, the people started discussing that orphanages nowadays were desperate for girls and were even willing to pay money to take them in. Our small protagonist, sensing danger, started running for her life. She questioned herself, wondering what better options she had in this situation. It was better to survive on her own than to be stuck with others, but suddenly she crashed into a couple. The lady and gentleman she collided with looked at her with concern. The lady asked her if she was all right and called her by her name, Riene. The people who had been chasing her approached the couple and demanded they hand over the girl. Riene quickly informed the couple that these people were trying to sell her as a slave. The people, trying to defend themselves, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. The man, however, was not convinced. He told the people that if they were going to send her to an orphanage anyway, they would take her. The people then questioned him, asking how they could trust that he would take good care of the child. In response, the man handed them a pouch filled with gold coins, which seemed to satisfy them. The man and the woman took Rihanna with them and apologized for whatever inconvenience she had faced. Rihanna, curious and cautious, asked if they knew her. The lady smiled warmly and told her that she was her mother's closest friend. She explained that Rihanna's mother was also a noble. When she was young, she was quite famous in society until she ran away with Rihanna's father. The lady assured Rihanna that they would be by her side from now on. As they reached their home, Rihanna was in awe. It was a huge and beautiful mansion, and she thought that if heaven existed, it would look just like this. As they entered the place, a boy stood near the stairs. The couple called him Killian, introducing him as their son. Rihanna found Killian incredibly cute, with his long eyelashes and adorable cheeks. His cuteness was simply irresistible. The parents introduced Killian to Rihanna, informing him that she was going to be a new family member. Rihanna and Killian shook hands, and he called her sister. Rihanna was enchanted by his cuteness and couldn't resist pinching his cheeks, which she did. She was delighted to find that his cheeks were as soft as rice cakes. This was the day when she met Killian, the one who would become the strongest person in the future in this world. As Rihanna pinched Killian's cheek, she couldn't help but notice the intense look of anger that crossed his face. Their mother observed this interaction and remarked with a smile that it seemed like Rihanna liked Killian. Intrigued, she turned to Killian and asked if he liked her back. Killian responded affirmatively, saying yes. Then, in a hopeful tone, he asked his mother if he could show his new sister around the house. His mother was overjoyed at the sight of them already bonding so closely. Killian grabbed Rihanna's hand, leading her to come with him as he intended to show her room. As they ascended the grand staircase, Rihanna's eyes were drawn to Killian's form ahead of her. She couldn't help but notice that Killian's bum was particularly nice, and the mischievous thought of giving it a pat crossed her mind. While she was lost in these thoughts, she missed a step and stumbled. Just as she began to fall, Killian turned back and quickly warned her, "Be careful on the third step from the top. It's a fake step designed to trick thieves." Rihanna, catching her balance, retorted that he could have mentioned this sooner, a hint of irritation in her voice. Killian continued to lead Rihanna to her new room. When they arrived, Rihanna's eyes widened in awe. The room was breathtakingly beautiful, decorated in shades of pink with accents of gold. Soft, plush teddy bears and elegantly wrapped gifts were scattered about the room, creating a sense of warmth and welcome. Rihanna couldn't help but compare this lavish room to the humble home she had in her previous life, thinking it was far grander than anything she had ever experienced. Killian, ever the mischievous guide, showed her a seemingly innocent curtain. As he pulled it back, a cloud of dust was released, covering Rihanna. She wondered if he was doing this on purpose to annoy her. Killian, seeing her reaction, turned around and asked with a smirk if she was okay. Rihanna, despite her annoyance, pretended that everything was fine. Internally, Rihanna tried to console herself, reasoning that Killian wouldn't be doing all of these things intentionally because he was still young and maybe just playful. However, as they continued their tour, her suspicions grew. Killian seemed to take delight in showing her the various traps and tricks around the house. He opened a water tap in such a way that a jet of water splashed directly onto her face, soaking her. Later, he led her to a spot where, according to him, pressing a button would light the stove. Instead, when she pressed it, it released a small electric shock. Rihanna's initial belief that these incidents were accidental began to wane as they kept occurring. Eventually, she couldn't ignore the pattern and decided to confront Killian, asking him outright if he was doing all of this on purpose. Rihanna told Killian firmly that he shouldn't be engaging in such troublesome behavior, and that it wasn't right to cause others distress. Killian, unfazed, turned toward her and asked with a defiant tone, "So what are you going to tell Mom and Dad?" Rihanna responded that if he continued with his mischievous antics, she would have no choice but to complain to their parents. Killian's response was chilling. He told her that if things got worse, she would be the one kicked out, not him. Rihanna realized he wasn't wrong. Her position in the family was tenuous, relying solely on the Duchess's past friendship with her mother. Desperate to understand why Killian harbored such animosity towards her, Rihanna asked if he disliked her. Killian's blunt response was yes. When she inquired further, seeking to understand his reasons, he cryptically told her to think about it. Puzzled and a bit hurt, Rihanna found herself in front of a portrait. As she traced the lines of the painting with her hand, she realized it depicted the 35th Duke of Astera. The name struck a chord in her memory. As she pieced together the clues, it dawned on her that the boy next to her was none other than Killian Astera, the male lead from a novel she had read in her previous life. Killian was known for his incredible strength but also for his terrible personality and sociopathic tendencies. He had an older sister of common origin who wasn't the legitimate heir, but acted as though she was. This sister bullied the female lead, only to be eventually killed by Killian himself. Rihanna pondered why Killian disliked her so intensely, even though she hadn't done anything to him yet. Reflecting on their interactions, she recalled how she had pinched his cheek earlier. In the novel, Killian was notorious for holding grudges and taking revenge for even the slightest offenses. Rihanna realized that she might be in serious trouble, but she wasn't someone who would give up easily. Determined to survive, she concluded that there was only one way to ensure her safety. She needed to gain Killian's favor. Rihanna devised a plan to win Killian over. She observed that he trained alone, and thought that by becoming his training partner, she might be able to endear herself to him. One day, she gathered her courage and approached him during his training session. Before she could say anything, Killian noticed her and asked, somewhat annoyed, what she was doing there. Rihanna quickly explained that she wanted to be friends with him, but Killian flatly refused. Undeterred, she thought about how she could be of assistance to him. She decided that at the very least, she could help by retrieving his arrows. To win his favor, she complimented his archery skills, telling him he handled the arrows with impressive precision and suggesting he might be the best archer in the country. Killian, however, dismissed her flattery, stating that his father was the best archer. Rihanna swiftly changed the subject, hoping to avoid further confrontation. A few days later, as Rihanna wandered through the vast library, she heard a voice from behind her. Do you have the items? She turned and responded that she had brought them, realizing that she had stumbled upon a potential weakness of Killian's. This discovery gave her a glimmer of hope. It was a box of colorful macarons. Killian praised her, saying, "Good job," with a smile. Rihanna, with a glint of expectation in her eyes, asked about the fee for the errand she had just run. Killian, while munching on the macarons, told her she was being childish. Rihanna, feeling slightly annoyed, asked him if he couldn't be more mature and share some of the sweets with her. Killian, feeling a bit magnanimous, responded that as an adult, he would give her two. They often met between the library bookshelves, a place where their risky exchanges began. These habits started during tea time. One day, they were having tea with the Duchess. The Duchess offered Rihanna some macarons and informed her that these were new snacks brought from the capital, renowned for their sweetness. The Duchess asked Rihanna if she liked sweets and mentioned that Killian hated sweets. She added that she always wanted to buy something like this if she had a daughter. In this family, the Duke, the Duchess, and Killian never touched sweets. During every tea time, Rihanna was the only one eating them diligently, and it seemed the others had noticed. Rihanna thanked the Duchess sincerely and started eating the macarons. The macarons had a crispy exterior that crumbled delightfully, and a thick jam that oozed out with each bite. The Duchess, with a gentle smile, asked Killian if he wanted to have some. She knew he didn't like sweets, but since his sister found them delicious, she thought he might give them a try. Killian, feeling a bit adventurous, said yes this time and reached for a macaron. But suddenly, he withdrew his hand, denying his earlier decision, and declared that only kids liked sweets. He resumed drinking his tea. The Duchess, understanding his hesitation, told Rihanna to have all the sweets, and Rihanna didn't refuse the generous offer. Killian watched her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity while she enjoyed the sweets. Rihanna told the Duchess that she couldn't eat them all at once, so she decided to keep the box and eat them whenever she felt hungry. Killian had developed a habit of asking Rihanna to bring the sweets to him quietly in the library space, ensuring no one noticed him indulging. After a few more of these clandestine trades, it seemed like Killian's opinion of Rihanna improved. One day, while Killian was eating the sweets, Rihanna warned him that if he ate all of them, he might get sick. Killian, trying to appear tough, told her that sweets were for children and that he didn't indulge in them. Despite his words, he clearly enjoyed the sweets but didn't want to admit that he was still a kid. He wanted to maintain a tough and mature persona. Killian believed that cool adults, like the Duke and Duchess, didn't eat sweets. Killian, with a serious expression, told Rihanna that he had been an adult like his parents since he was 2 years old. He handed the sweets back to Rihanna, trying to reinforce his mature image. Killian then looked at Rihanna and hinted, "Don't you want to eat chocolate and hard candy?" He was subtly indicating that he wanted to eat them too. Rihanna understood his hint very well, gave him a playful wink, and said she would let the Duchess know about his preference right away. This shared secret helped them develop a good relationship. Rihanna also told Killian that if he needed anything else, he could call her anytime. Rihanna was finally happy, thinking it would be nice to maintain this relationship just as it was. Nothing more, nothing less, if she had to survive. Some time later, in a room, a girl approached Rihanna and asked if she was from a common background. Rihanna looked at the girl and recognized her as the daughter of the Humphrey Viscount family, a cadet branch. Rihanna, recalling the novel she had read, thought about how this girl showed her true colors once the adults and Killian left. The girl told Rihanna that if she were in her position, she would be too ashamed to show her face. She also predicted that Rihanna would have a hard time in social circles later. Rihanna had no plans to join any social circles. The girl continued to rant about how embarrassing it would be for Rihanna to join any social circles. But Rihanna's plan was to become independent before Killian became an adult. In the original story, Killian was known for his horrible personality and later plotted to overthrow his father. He seized his title as soon as he fell in love with the heroine, after the Duke and Duchess were ousted. The adopted daughter's execution followed swiftly. Despite the recent improvement in her relationship with Killian, Rihanna knew that anything could happen. For now, winning Killian's favor was Rihanna's priority, and she was also steadily saving up for her independence fund. The girl standing behind Rihanna continued talking and asked if she was ignoring her. But suddenly, Killian entered the room. The girl quickly changed her attitude and told Killian that she had been looking for him for a while. The girl's name was Olivia. Killian and Olivia decided to go and play somewhere else. Olivia, with a haughty tone, asked Rihanna not to come with them as she didn't want to play with her. Killian, sensing the tension, told Rihanna to wait for a moment and assured her that he'd be right back. Killian gave a wicked smile as he and Olivia walked away, leaving Rihanna with an inexplicable sense of unease. Her fears were justified when Killian returned alone. Later, the parents were standing in front of Killian and Rihanna, interrogating them about Olivia. A woman present asked Rihanna to explain everything in detail, as she was the oldest one there. Rihanna was asked what she had been doing all the time, making her feel the weight of the situation. Killian, sensing the growing tension and wanting to protect his sister, stepped forward bravely. He firmly stated that it wasn't Rihanna's fault. He explained that Olivia had explicitly said she didn't want to play with a commoner. The women were taken aback by this revelation, their expressions shifting to one of shock and disbelief. One of them, regaining her composure, asked Killian if he knew where Olivia had gone. Killian informed them that the last thing he knew was that she had told him she was going to the bathroom, but he wasn't certain beyond that. The Duke, recognizing the urgency of the situation, instructed his people to start searching for her both inside and outside the mansion, organizing a comprehensive search effort. Killian and Rihanna were sitting in a quiet room, waiting anxiously for any news about Olivia. Killian, trying to mask his concern with impatience, remarked that it would take forever to have dinner now. Rihanna, sitting there thoughtfully, looked at Killian and asked if he really didn't know where Olivia went. Killian, maintaining his earlier stance, told her that he genuinely didn't know. For a moment, Rihanna wanted to believe him because this Killian seemed different from the character in the novel she had read. The Killian she observed was diligent, quietly attending lessons that were too difficult for a child his age, completing his regular training without complaining, and always behaving maturely, never mistreating the servants. But if the character in the novel was his true self, in the worst case, Olivia could be dead by now. This troubling thought occupied Rihanna's mind, adding to her anxiety. Rihanna, unable to suppress her curiosity and concern, asked Killian again if he had any idea which way Olivia might have gone since she mentioned going to the bathroom. Killian, with a hint of irritation, turned the question back on her, asking if she didn't really like Olivia, and if that was the case, why she kept asking about her. Rihanna, sensing the need to clarify her intentions, told Killian that there must be some misunderstanding, as she did like Olivia and was genuinely worried about her. Killian was silent for a while, his face thoughtful, and then asked Rihanna if she really wanted to know where Olivia was. Rihanna, feeling a deep sense of worry and responsibility, couldn't just stand by and be an accomplice to a potential tragedy. She told Killian earnestly that she really wanted to find Olivia, and pleaded for his help. Killian, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes and feeling a twinge of empathy, finally relented and told her that Olivia was in the bathroom on the 5th floor. Rihanna was puzzled, trying to recall if there were indeed bathrooms on the 5th floor. On the 5th floor, there was one bathroom in the butler's room, another in the maid's quarters, and one in an unused guest room, although the guest room's bathroom was known to be broken. Killian suggested that Olivia might have used the butler's bathroom, but also noted that Olivia wouldn't use the common bathroom that the servants used. Indirectly, Killian made it clear where Olivia might be. As they searched for Olivia, Rihanna couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the house, its vastness making the search feel almost impossible. Killian, noticing her frustration and attempting to lighten the mood, even asked if they could stop and go eat some chocolate. However, Rihanna, determined and genuinely worried, insisted that they continue searching for Olivia. Killian, slightly amused but also intrigued by Rihanna's determination, asked if she really liked Olivia that much. Their search continued, the tension growing with each passing minute, and the mansion's expansive hallways and numerous rooms only adding to their anxiety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of searching and worrying, they found Olivia stuck in a basin with a malfunctioning spell. The spell had trapped her in a bizarre and dangerous way, and to save her, they had to cut her hair with scissors. Rihanna wasn't prepared for this drastic measure. The thought of cutting Olivia's hair was unsettling, but there was no other choice. Killian, taking charge of the situation, carefully cut Olivia's hair and freed her from the spell's grip. Olivia, now safe but visibly shaken, looked at them with a mix of relief and embarrassment. Killian, his usual composure returning, had only saved Olivia because his sister insisted she loved her. This incident solidified the complicated dynamics within the family, leaving Rihanna with much to ponder about her place in this intricate household and the true nature of those around her. Rihanna, although praising Killian for his efforts, couldn't hide her apprehension and fright at the scene unfolding before her eyes. Viscount, seated at the dining table, expressed her heartfelt gratitude towards Killian for locating Olivia. The entire family was gathered around the dining table, enjoying their meal. Killian, with a calm demeanor, clarified to everyone present that it wasn't him who had found Olivia, but his sister who had discovered her whereabouts. Olivia, with tears welling up in her eyes, looked at her mother and the assembled guests, and in a trembling voice, she revealed that Killian had cut her hair. She wanted to voice her complaint about his actions, but considering Killian was the son of the Duke, no one dared to take any action against him. Olivia's mother, trying to diffuse the tension, said soothingly, "It looks nice on you, and you look more beautiful than before." Rihanna, observing the scene, noticed everyone showering Killian with praise. She watched as Killian, with his small yet skillful hands, sliced a stick perfectly. As she gazed into his eyes, Rihanna could see that Killian didn't harbor any regret for what he had done to Olivia. Suddenly, the Duchess spoke up, addressing Rihanna with pride in her voice. She expressed how proud she was of Rihanna, stating that if it weren't for her, they wouldn't have found Olivia. The Duke, joining in, reiterated that they owed their thanks to Rihanna. Meanwhile, the Viscount and his wife who had accompanied Olivia seemed displeased with Rihanna, harboring disdain because she was merely a commoner. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Olivia's mother tried to change the subject, announcing that they had almost forgotten to give the children their gifts. She had brought a special gift for Killian, dolls shaped like monsters, crafted by the most renowned artisan in the capital. Additionally, she handed him some pocket money and a gold coin as a reward for cutting Olivia's hair. The Duchess also presented Olivia with a gift and some pocket money. As the gifts were distributed, Rihanna couldn't help but wonder if she too would receive any money. The Duchess then stood behind Rihanna and announced that it was time for her to receive a gift. However, Olivia's mother and Viscount who had accompanied her declared that they hadn't brought any gift for Rihanna. Rihanna, who suspected this was because she was a commoner, felt a twinge of disappointment. Her dream was to become rich, and as an ordinary person, she knew that money was essential. Mustering her courage, Rihanna asked the woman if she could simply receive pocket money. Viscount standing next to her scolded her, calling her a greedy child for asking so directly. At that moment, the Duke and Duchess stood up, defending Rihanna. They confronted the Viscount, expressing disbelief that she would only offer pocket money to one person and claimed ignorance of her financial troubles. The Duke added that although he had heard rumors about the Viscount's financial difficulties, he hadn't expected them to be so severe. The Duchess, taking the situation into her own hands, assured Rihanna that she would give her pocket money on behalf of the Viscount. Rihanna was then presented with a custom-made doll, adorned with real jewels, crafted by an exceptionally skilled artisan. As Rihanna held the exquisite doll, she heard Killian's voice and assumed he must be upset because she had received more gifts than him. But when she looked up, she saw Killian staring intently at the Viscount and his wife, his eyes filled with a dangerous seriousness. Later that night, Rihanna, clutching a pillow, nervously approached Killian's room. She asked if they could sleep together because she was anxious about what might happen during the night. Her primary concern was ensuring Killian's safety, as she decided to stay by his side all night to prevent any harm from coming to him. She tried to maintain a reasonable distance while keeping their relationship amicable. Killian opened the door and, with a hint of curiosity, asked Rihanna why she wanted to sleep with him. Rihanna, trying to hide her true fears, admitted that she was scared to sleep alone. Killian, calling her a coward, grabbed her hand and led her inside the room. Rihanna held onto his hand tightly, determined not to let him escape. Reflecting on the long day, Rihanna felt exhausted and ready to fall asleep immediately. However, Killian, lying next to her, asked why she was so kind to Olivia. Rihanna found his innocence endearing and answered with a proverb, "Cuteness forgives everything." Killian, not fully understanding, asked if she was okay. To change the topic, Rihanna simply replied, "Killian, you are very wonderful." Killian, seemingly satisfied, wished his sister good night and urged her to sleep well. Riene, looking at him, couldn't help but find him incredibly cute. She wondered if this was how cat owners felt about their pets. Although she knew what kind of person Killian might become in the future, his current cuteness often overshadowed everything else in her mind. Rihanna thought that once Olivia left, they would be able to put some distance between them, making things easier. The following morning, Killian woke up, contemplating the events of the previous day. He felt that he had merely given Olivia the punishment she deserved for tormenting his sister. Yet, strangely, it seemed like he was the only one being viewed with odd expressions. Resolutely, Killian looked at his sister and decided that she was his one and only precious subordinate, the one constant in his life. The following day, Killian and Rihanna found themselves seated in the library, each engrossed in a book. The tranquility of their reading was soon interrupted when Olivia burst into the room, clutching a doll in her small hands. With an anxious expression, she approached Rihanna and asked if she would accompany her to the bathroom. Olivia's fear from the previous day's incident was still evident. Although Rihanna initially declined, she soon realized that refusing might lead to regret. Thus, she decided to go with Olivia. Olivia, clearly anxious, hurriedly dragged Rihanna along. Later, the three of them were involved in an elaborate game where Olivia took on the role of a princess. She tasked her prince with the mission of slaying a fearsome monster to rescue her. In this imaginative play, Rihanna was cast as the prince, while Killian was designated as the monster. Olivia, with great enthusiasm, told Rihanna that if the prince managed to defeat the monster, she would agree to marry her as part of their play. Killian stood between Rihanna and Olivia, puzzled by Olivia's intense behavior. Rihanna was expected to be with Olivia throughout, including during moments like sitting in the bathroom or washing her hands, since Olivia was terrified of the sink. To ease Olivia's fear, Rihanna even captured a tiny spider for her. This act endeared Rihanna to Olivia, who then became a devoted fan of Rihanna. Olivia constantly asked the prince to marry her, and Rihanna, somewhat amused, agreed. Suddenly, Killian had a thought and asked if Rihanna was genuinely planning to marry Olivia. Rihanna wondered if Killian was out of his mind because, in their game, Olivia and Rihanna were the main characters, with Killian assigned the role of the monster. Killian then reminded Rihanna that she had previously told him he was cuter than Olivia, and therefore, instead of Olivia, he wanted to marry Rihanna. Olivia interrupted, stating firmly that Rihanna could not marry Killian because she was already planning to marry her. Killian then questioned Olivia whether she could give more gifts than he could, explaining that the true rule of happiness was to live joyfully and exchange many gifts. He recounted how the Duke and Duchess often gave each other presents even when it wasn't their anniversary. Killian's idea of marriage seemed to revolve around the concept of exchanging gifts. At this moment, the Duchess appeared from behind and inquired about Killian's statements. She explained to him that, as family members, Rihanna and Killian could not marry each other. The Duchess also made it clear that despite Killian's affection for Rihanna, it was impossible for him to marry his sister. Killian was deeply upset by this revelation. Meanwhile, Rihanna, despite understanding that it was only a game, realized that marriage was a significant matter for nobility, and something that should be properly taught to the younger generation. The Duchess picked up Killian, informed Rihanna that Killian needed to have a discussion with his mother, and took him away. Killian's absence was noticeable for a period of time. After a few days, Olivia returned home, and soon afterward, Killian reappeared. Rihanna inquired about his whereabouts and whether he was okay. Killian explained that he had been with his mother and, more importantly, presented her with a jar filled with snacks. This jar was Killian's treasured box number 1, snacks. Rihanna was puzzled as to why Killian was giving it to her. Killian explained that it was the most valuable item to him, so he decided to present it to his sister and formally ask her to marry him. Rihanna was taken aback to receive a marriage proposal from one of the most prominent characters in the novel. Although Killian had initially shown animosity towards her, Rihanna was now left wondering how their relationship had become so close. With a laugh, she questioned if the jar was intended as a proposal gift and reminded Killian that siblings could not marry. Killian, undeterred, stated that he didn't care about the rules and was determined to marry his sister. After a moment of contemplation, Rihanna, smiling, agreed to the proposal. Killian then moved closer and embraced Rihanna. Rihanna found herself reflecting on how this little boy would eventually meet the heroine and fall in love with her. She considered playfully biting Killian's cheeks but ended up doing so unconsciously. Killian warned her that they would soon be in serious trouble and needed to escape together. Meanwhile, the Duke and Duchess were engaged in a discussion about whether Killian's week of imprisonment was excessively harsh. The Duchess mentioned that Killian had made the Viscount and his wife bald, and she had expended significant magical energy to create a wig, indicating that Killian needed some guidance. Suddenly, a guard arrived with the news that young Master Killian had struck the guards and escaped. The Duke and Duchess were both frustrated and worried about their son's well-being. Killian persistently insisted to Rihanna that they were in grave danger and needed to escape from their house immediately. That day, Rihanna spent the entire night trying to calm Killian's incessant rambling. The true nature of Killian's warnings became clear a week later. On that day, Rihanna was dressed exquisitely in a blue dress, and the Duchess praised her, saying she looked stunning and that the dress suited her perfectly. Rihanna graciously thanked the Duchess for selecting the dress. The Duke, Duchess, Killian, and Rihanna were sitting in chairs, preparing to go to the National Foundation Day celebration. The Duchess also casually mentioned that there might be lines of men interested in marrying their dear Rihanna. Killian leaned in and whispered in Rihanna's ear, reiterating that attending the National Foundation Day celebration would be extremely dangerous, and that they should make an escape as soon as possible. Rihanna, her face pale with worry, pondered the idea of escaping later on her own after she had saved up enough money. Killian was reminded that as a member of the Astera family, and the guest of honor, his absence at the National Foundation Day celebration was unthinkable. Rihanna reflected on this, thinking that even though she had read this novel, she was unaware of this particular fact. The first emperor who founded the empire was the initial Duke of Astera. However, after the empire's foundation, he established a state affairs board and handed over the emperor's position to the prime minister. Rihanna mused that Killian bore a striking resemblance to his ancestors. The Duchess then informed Killian that this year's National Foundation Day celebration was even more special because it was the first time their Rihanna Astera would attend an official event. At the palace, the Duke, Duchess, and the young lord and lady were announced as they entered. Most people bowed their heads in respect, but there were also sharp, scrutinizing gazes from nobles directed at Rihanna, who was a commoner. These gazes were more blatant and judgmental than Rihanna had anticipated. While Rihanna was lost in her thoughts, feeling the weight of the judgment around her, the Duchess gently held her hand and invited her to come along. Women standing in the palace began greeting the Duchess and inquiring about their daughter, Rihanna. The Duchess made her way through the crowd, proudly introducing her daughter to everyone. During a conversation with the Countess, the Duchess asked if her son had attended the event. The Duchess also mentioned that the Countess's son was around the same age as Rihanna. As soon as the Duchess said this, Killian placed his hand on his mother's face. The Duchess, slightly annoyed, told Killian that the conversation was between women and asked him to go find his father. Suddenly, a strikingly beautiful young lady, Marchioness Magin, approached and greeted the Duchess and the young lord. She inquired about Rihanna with genuine interest. Rihanna found the Marchioness to be exceptionally beautiful and impressive. The Marchioness also asked if the young lord had been well recently. Killian, curious, asked the Marchioness if Marquis Magin also had a daughter. She laughed and introduced her daughter, Esmeralda. Esmeralda had straight, ebony-like hair, purple eyes, and gorgeous features. She was the female lead of the original novel. Rihanna felt relieved to see her and decided that she must become friends with her. She thought about how, in the original story, she was destined to be killed by Killian. To avoid this fate, Rihanna resolved to be endlessly kind to the female lead. The Marchioness remarked that the young lady seemed to be the same age as her daughter and expressed her hope that they could become close friends. Rihanna saw this as her opportunity and decided to spend time with Lady Esmeralda. Rihanna asked Killian if he would join them, but he replied that he needed to stay with his mother. Rihanna speculated that since the original novel hadn't started yet, neither of them seemed interested in each other. Esmeralda embodied the very essence of the female lead in the novel. She warmly suggested that Rihanna call her Esme. The only thing that seemed different was that the daughter of Marquis Magin appeared too stiff, whereas in the original novel, Esmeralda was the beloved daughter of a marquess, known for her bold and cheerful personality. Rihanna found Esmeralda incredibly adorable, and they both expressed a desire to become friends. Rihanna decided that for now, becoming friends was her top priority. She wanted to learn all about Esmeralda's hobbies and started asking her questions about fencing, horseback riding, and archery. Esmeralda informed Rihanna that she was diligently practicing, but that her skills were not yet very good. As they conversed, Rihanna remembered that in the original novel, the two main characters shared similar hobbies and skills, making them a perfect match. However, it seemed that Esmeralda's skills hadn't improved yet. Rihanna asked Esmeralda if she liked snacks, thinking that, according to her knowledge, children typically loved snacks. Esmeralda admitted that she liked snacks but mentioned that they were forbidden because they made her gain weight. Rihanna was shocked to hear this from a child. Suddenly, Esmeralda was struck by a severe headache. Rihanna told Esmeralda to wait for a moment as she wanted to bring some warm soup and food to help her regain her energy. As Rihanna went to gather these items, she pondered the significant differences between Esmeralda and the confident female lead she remembered. Rihanna wondered if the original story had changed and resolved to keep a close eye on Esmeralda while growing closer to her as a friend. While thinking about all this and carrying the soup, Rihanna was suddenly pushed from behind by someone, causing the soup to spill and fall to the ground. In that brief moment, Rihanna's thoughts raced. If she died here, she would have to reincarnate and work as a palace maid just to afford a single gem. However, it turned out she merely fell to the floor and survived the incident. As she gathered herself, 3 young girls stood in front of her. The girl in the middle, with an accusatory tone, claimed that Rihanna had pushed her. It dawned on Rihanna that she had stumbled into a cliched scenario where young noble ladies engage in bullying. This was all too predictable for her. As Rihanna looked around, she noticed that a crowd had started to gather, watching the scene unfold. The girl in the middle continued, scolding Rihanna, saying that regardless of her common background, pushing people without even apologizing was utterly unacceptable. The girl standing beside her chimed in, adding that Lady Ramira's incredibly expensive dress had gotten stained because of Rihanna. It became clear that the girl in the middle was named Ramira. The third girl, with a haughty expression, demanded to know how Rihanna planned to take responsibility for this mishap. Rihanna stood up, brushing off the dust from her clothes, and decided that she needed to educate these girls quickly and efficiently. She maintained her composure and turned the situation to her advantage. She calmly stated that the shoes she was wearing were specially made for this occasion, and since Ramira had pushed her and stained them, Ramira should take full responsibility. Ramira immediately began to argue, insisting that it was Rihanna who had pushed her. However, Rihanna wasn't paying attention to her protests. Instead, she acted as though Ramira was apologizing for her mistake, completely ignoring Ramira's complaints. This only served to further annoy and anger Ramira, who was infuriated by Rihanna's seemingly careless attitude. Rihanna continued to act as if Ramira had offered to compensate her, no matter the cost. Ramira, bewildered and frustrated, found it hard to understand what was happening. Rihanna was not only ignoring her but also twisting the narrative to blame everything on Ramira. Ramira had never anticipated this turn of events. She had assumed that Rihanna, being a commoner, wouldn't dare to speak up against her. Yet, this was clearly not the case. Tears welled up in Ramira's eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure. Rihanna, seeing this, wondered if she had gone too far with her approach. Deciding to bring the confrontation to a close, Rihanna stated that if compensation for the damages was arranged, all would be forgiven. As Ramira tried to stop Rihanna from leaving, she tripped and fell into a pool of spilled soup. Rihanna turned to help but ended up slipping as well. However, she was caught and saved by a boy who had been observing the scene. Rihanna gratefully thanked him for saving her from further embarrassment. At that moment, Ramira's mother arrived, her face a mask of anger, and demanded to know who had done this to her daughter. Ramira, pointing a trembling finger at Rihanna, placed the blame squarely on her. Rihanna realized that this was a significant problem and she had no desire to attract further attention. Ramira's mother began to scold Rihanna harshly, questioning the quality of the upbringing she had received at home. Rihanna tried to explain the situation, but her patience wore thin. She decided it was time to give them a taste of their own medicine. Rihanna informed Ramira's mother that they needed to establish the facts. She reiterated that she wasn't the one who had pushed Ramira. In fact, it was Ramira who had pushed her, causing the food to spill. Rihanna pointed out that the Duchess had crafted this outfit specifically for this ceremony, and now her dragon leather shoes were stained. Ramira and her mother were visibly shocked by this revelation. Rihanna continued her explanation, stating that the shoes she was wearing were made from a type of leather that required daily tanning for 100 years without missing a single day, as it couldn't be treated normally. This was a rare and special process, making the shoes incredibly valuable. She further exaggerated by saying that the shoes were so rare that ordinary people might never see them in their lifetime. Rihanna had fabricated this story to elevate the perceived value of the shoes damaged by Ramira. She then delivered her final blow, informing them that the compensation required would be substantial, and that the Duke's family would send them a certificate of content from the workshop soon. Ramira's mother, in a state of disbelief, asked Rihanna if she had any evidence that her daughter was responsible for all of this. Just then, the boy who had saved Rihanna stepped forward and declared that he was a witness. He revealed that he was the prince of the kingdom of Krija. Rihanna was taken aback, realizing he was indeed a real prince. The prince confirmed that Ramira had pushed Rihanna. Rihanna recalled reading in the novel that the kingdom of Krija was a powerful and friendly nation, mentioned several times in the original story. Ramira's mother's demeanor changed instantly, and she instructed her daughter to apologize to Riene. She also offered her own apologies to Riene. Riene was amazed at how quickly everything had been resolved with just a single word from the prince. Soon, Esmeralda arrived and asked Riene if everything was all right. Riene assured her that everything had been resolved and inquired if Esmeralda was feeling better. Esmeralda expressed her regret for not staying with Riene, but Riene was grateful for the prince's timely intervention and help. Esmeralda mentioned that it was their turn to dance and asked Riene if she was truly okay. Riene replied that if Esme was fine, then they should head to the dance quickly. Esmeralda's mother had been watching the entire scene closely. The prince approached Riene, took her hand in his, and asked her if she would like to be engaged to him. Killian was visibly enraged, and as he looked at his mother, the Duchess, she informed him that today, they should let Riene hang out with other friends as well. The Duchess was adamant that nothing would ruin Riene's romantic endeavors, not even from the very beginning. She was determined to ensure that Riene had a perfect start to her social life. Riene stood there, feeling somewhat out of place, when Esmeralda approached her and asked her to dance. Esmeralda suggested they dance together to refresh themselves and have some fun. Before Riene could respond or take any action, Esmeralda was quickly surrounded by boys who were rushing towards her, eager to dance with Lady Esmeralda. Riene couldn't help but question her own beauty in comparison to Esmeralda's radiant charm. Just then, the prince returned and asked Riene if she would like to dance with him. He formally introduced himself as Heath Krija, the first prince of the kingdom of Krija. Riene immediately remembered him from the novel she had read. Riene introduced herself as Riene Estira from the Estira ducal house and expressed her gratitude to Heath for his previous assistance. The prince gracefully kissed Riene's hand, and she couldn't help but marvel at the refined etiquette of this world. Feeling shy and somewhat flustered for a moment, Heath inquired if he could take her silence as acceptance of his dance request. Riene, though nervous, said yes but mentioned that she wasn't very skilled at dancing. Heath noticed her hesitation and the discomfort in her movements, and they stood there, looking at each other in silence. Riene apologized to Heath for her poor dancing skills and suggested that he should have asked another lady to dance. Heath, however, informed her that he wanted to dance with her specifically because he was genuinely interested in her. Riene pondered in her mind, thinking that Heath was definitely the type of person who would make many women cry later on. Heath then revealed to Riene that he knew her secret. Riene was taken aback for a moment, and Heath elaborated that it was rare for common nobles to witness, but the Krija royal family possessed a dragon leather vest, an heirloom passed down through generations. It was reputed to be the best shield, impervious to everything, from a summer downpour to a hail of arrows on the battlefield, a monster's strike, or even terribly sticky soup. Heath's mention of the dragon leather vest made Riene recall the lie she had told to Ramira and her mother. She admitted that Heath had caught her in her deception. Heath told her he was genuinely impressed by how skillfully she had managed to deceive others. It was the first time he had seen someone his age lie so smoothly. Heath then asked Riene if she would consider being engaged to him. Riene was taken aback by the proposal, thinking it was astonishing to receive 2 proposals in just a few days, something she hadn't experienced even once in her previous life. Riene expressed to Heath that talking about engagement so suddenly was a bit overwhelming. Heath clarified that he wasn't referring to an actual marriage but was proposing a contract engagement. He explained that as the first prince of Krija, his position was precarious due to his mother, the queen, being dethroned, and the succession within the royal family becoming uncertain between him and the second prince, who was born to the new queen. Heath wanted to secure his position through a strategic connection with the Estira ducal house. In return for the engagement, Heath promised to fully support Riene in all social activities, pointing out that despite its power, the Estira family had a weak presence in social circles due to their infrequent participation. Riene considered this and asked if she could receive a monthly cash allowance in her name, thinking that if she wanted to live independently outside the ducal house in the future, cash would be essential. Gold, coins, or items from the ducal house were difficult to manage as a commoner. Heath coughed, and Riene wondered if her request was too much, but Heath agreed and assured her that he could arrange that for her. Riene then mentioned to Heath that, as he might have observed today, she couldn't fully claim to be a complete Estira. She was unsure of how she could truly help him. Heath reassured her, saying that they would surely become perfect partners for each other. He asked her again if she would be willing to be engaged to him. Riene thought she couldn't miss such an opportunity and agreed, but just then, she noticed Killian standing next to her. She knew this was going to be problematic. When Heath brought up the engagement, her little brother Killian was the first thing that came to her mind. She had promised to marry Killian as a joke, and now she worried that if she announced her engagement to someone else, he might start hating her again. With tears in his eyes, Killian asked Rihanna if she was truly getting engaged. Killian turned around and walked away, feeling hurt and betrayed. Heath called out to Rihanna, but she told him they would talk later and rushed after Killian. Killian confronted Rihanna, reminding her that she had promised to marry him. Rihanna tried to explain that her engagement to Heath was not an actual marriage but a strategic move, and that she had her reasons for this decision. Killian asked if engagement was different from marriage. Rihanna explained to her brother that engagement was merely a promise to marry and could be broken. She told Killian that she couldn't fully explain at the moment, but this engagement was very important to her. Killian asked if she was telling the truth this time, and Rihanna assured him it was true and asked him to believe in her. Killian hugged Rihanna tightly, thinking to himself that she had promised to marry him just a few days ago. He started doubting her promises, realizing that if he clung to empty promises, he would eventually lose her. Killian decided that if that was the case, he needed to find a more secure way to keep Rihanna by his side than just a promise. As the years passed, Rihanna and Killian grew up. On the day Rihanna was leaving, Killian looked at her and told her to come back soon. They were both adults now, and Killian told her he would be waiting for her return, a promise that held a deeper meaning in their now complicated relationship. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.